Hello and welcome to this edition of the FDT-TV podcast. Now, before we get started, if you haven't already, make sure you go over to the YouTube channel and look for the big gold cup. Press that subscribe button, help us get to 100 subscribers. This week, lots has gone on, but before we get there, how you doing, Mike?
Up and down. Up because of the football, down a bit on the old personal situations, but I won't bore you with that because no one really gives a shit, if I'm being honest. I don't tend to normally give a shit, but yeah, good. Flying high for the Premier League. Boys, again, pulled out the stops. I'm just waiting for... every week we seem to get, you haven't played anyone good yet. You haven't played anyone good yet. And the chances are, I would say that we still haven't played anyone good yet.
I was going to say, you still ain't played anyone good yet.
We'll come on to that in a bit. But yeah, I'm good, mate. How about yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. We're slowly climbing, aren't we? Slowly climbing. We're almost qualified for the next round of the Conference League, so that's good. What I will say before we get started, for those of you who heard last week where I said, maybe we'll get a special guest on, that's my fault. I didn't reach out. So there is a West Ham Liverpool fixture coming up in a week or so. So maybe we'll reach out for that and get him on the next one there if he's about. But yeah, so we are slowly climbing back up the Premier League, Mike. Won't be long, and we'll be ahead of you.
Yeah, go for it, mate. Go for it. We're due a run of bad results soon, so yeah, you never know. It may come in the coming weeks.
So
not it.
Well, we'll wait and see, shall we? We'll wait and see. I mean, you've seen off Tottenham, you've seen off Liverpool now. Mm-hmm. Is that the sort of the Big Six challenge gone, or because you've still got to play Chelsea and City? Chelsea depends on what the way the wind's blowing and whether they play well. Although under Graham Potter, we've started to already see a bit of a turning of the tide, I think. But Manchester City, is that the game you're worried about?
Nah, mate.
Momentum destroyer, I think.
Yeah, no, not a chance, mate. We're going to come out all guns blazing, pun intended, and we're going to blow them away. No, in all honesty, I said at the start of the season that I would like to see us put in a top four, and you've asked me a couple of times over the last couple of weeks, do I see us as serious contenders? And I'll go back to my previous statement. The ones that we need to watch out for this season at Manchester City, obviously they've recruited really well. They've scoring goals for fun, it seems, and I don't think there's going to be any chance of anyone kind of catching them. But saying that, they have had a couple of draws. So could we nick a draw with the way that we're playing at the moment? I don't know. But to be honest, I mean, would they score the volume of goals without Haaland if he picked up an injury?
I don't think they would score the volume, but I still think they would score goals.
Okay. But yeah, so I think as long as he stays fit, potentially an Invincibles season, do we reckon? And if, I know I've said it a couple of times that we would never see the Invincibles again, but obviously we know that Manchester City currently undefeated at the moment. The 7 wins, 2 draws. Do you think it could be a possibility, or do you think they will slip up?
I think the biggest question mark that comes over that is not necessarily could they do it. I think looking at their squad and the rest of the Premier League and what's going on at the minute, it's more than possible. There's a lot of teams that are struggling. I think the biggest possibly fork in the road for them will be the World Cup. I don't think it's ever been done before where there's been a World Cup in the middle of a season. I know Haaland's not going, but a lot of their team will be going, which is all added games, isn't it? And considering the form they're in, they look like they're going to get to the final of everything. That's an exorbitant amount of games, so that's where the wheels could come off, and through no fault of their own, really. But yeah, no. Other than that, you like them to score, don't you? So even if they do go behind, they seem to be able to have this ability to come back. But also confidence breeds confidence. So that's, I think, will the World Cup do them good? No, I think Pep will want to not have the World Cup. but we'll wait and see. The most interesting thing, I think, will be when Parliament discuss whether Haaland should be deported because it's not fair.
I agree.
There is.
I have seen the petition with like over 1 million people. Oh, I think it might be 1.5 million people have signed it.
Yeah, which is quite funny. They asked Pep about it the other day, and he's like, "What do you mean? Why would he be deported?" And they're like, "Oh no, just because people think it's not fair." And he's like, "Oh yeah, ha ha ha, very funny joke." But yeah, he's an unbelievable player, and yeah, phenomenal. Harry Kane could not have lived up to what he's doing.
No, definitely not.
I think the old guard of the Manchester City fans who were supporting him when they got relegated a couple of times will be loving it in a minute. But even better than that, Arsenal took back the lead in the Premier League by beating Liverpool.
Yes.
Now, I see the first 6 minutes of that game, and then went and did something else. But you scored already within that time. Yep. And again, I mean, we'll get into it a little bit more. I'll let you take over. But there's some question marks over Trent, which I think we'll get to in a minute. But what was your thoughts on that game and that performance in particular?
So we started extremely brightly, and it's a complete contrast from what we saw from last season. So last season we always seemed to really struggle to get into games, but for this season we seem to be starting quicker, and it kind of tails off towards the end of the first half, and then the start of the second half. Usually, from what we've seen this season, again we start quite strongly, and then it kind of tails off again. And I would assume that that's down to kind of game management, or just because the players are putting such a shift in, they're just absolutely bloody knackered come the end of the 45 minutes or the 90 minutes. As you quite rightly said, we scored within 58 seconds. Martinelli banged the ball into the bottom corner, and it was an electric start. I was so happy to see us start or come out the blocks that quickly. But like I just mentioned, we did give away 2 stupid goals, I think. But I think at the times that we did concede, we did see glimpses of the quality that Liverpool possess. And we're not seeing it enough this season, thankfully, because they did quite rightly get back into the game. They did kind of rip open our defence or tear our defence. And scored 2 good goals. Bobby Firmino and Darwin Nunez.
We all knew what you meant.
Whatever it is. He did score a good goal, and they did have a couple of other chances, but obviously Rambo was there to mop it up. Now, there was a few question marks within that particular game. Potential handball on Gabriel. I can understand why it wasn't given, but at the same time we have seen him given already this season within the Premier League, ball being so close. His arm, I suppose, was in an unnatural position-ish, but I think it was something to do with the proximity why it was overturned.
Yep.
That he wouldn't have been able to get his hand out of the way anyway. So I kind of get that. There was also a couple of question marks over a couple of challenges on some of the Liverpool players. And again, I think we have ridden our luck potentially on a couple of those decisions, because obviously we have seen, again, people with retrospective red cards and all this sort of stuff through VAR decisions. But the one thing that I did really like about our performance is that we didn't give up. I know we were ahead at each point of the game. So obviously we went 1-0 up, Liverpool pegged us back. We went 2-1 up, Liverpool pegged us back. We then went up again. But the thing I enjoyed most was our game management for that part.
Yep.
And we seemed to see the game out. When we scored a third goal, I think we actually looked stronger. There was a couple of substitutions that were made late on into the game as well, which I do think helped freshen up some legs that were on the pitch as well. So another fantastic performance from us. 8 wins out of 9. I think if you would have said to me at the start of the season, this is what you will be at this point in the league, in the season, I would have laughed at you. There was a couple of banana skin games, that being one of them. The Tottenham game, I think, as much as confident as I was, there was always that bit in the back of my mind, could they turn up? So yeah, I'm really happy with the performance. Can't fault the effort from the players. Gabby Jesus again with another outstanding performance. Martinelli absolutely run his socks off. And one of the things that we've mentioned time and time again on this channel is the fact that you don't mind if your team lose, i.e. the game against Manchester United, when you see your team put the shift in.
Yep.
It was just unfortunate within that particular game that we were caught out by two stupid errors, long balls, split the defence, and they caught us on the counter-attack. So, yeah, I'm absolutely over the moon with the performances that we see recently, and I couldn't be happier.
So going back, there's a couple of things which I want to pick up on what you've said there. Obviously, the first being Gabriel's handball. Liverpool were shouting for a penalty, and if I'm honest, I'm going to give VAR a handshake here, a metaphorical handshake, because I think they got that right. He didn't move his arm towards it. His arm was already there, and the ball was pinged at him. It's like sort of that. Just I think he was just shitting his pants. It was either going to hit him in the face or in the nuts. But yeah, no. So I think they got that decision right. And the other thing you said about Martinelli being on fire, it seemed quite obvious from very early on. Sort of, especially with that goal, he told him to run at Trent. Because he's got the speed, he's got the skill, run at him. He's having a bit of a torrid time in a minute, getting behind and just run at him. And that's what he did all game. And, yeah, from what I see, phenomenal. What I would say is Firmino come on and scored, started to sort of change the tide slightly because he's a bit more of a selfless player. But we see Darwin Núñez shooting a lot from really tight angles, where if he'd passed it across, as Mane would have done, or Firmino would have done, would have ended up with a goal. And I don't want to say I've been banging on about it for a couple of months now, but
you've been banging on about
I've been banging on. And Liverpool, I mean, after 9 games, I know they've got a game in hand, but after 9 games, they're level on points with us, only by the fact of VAR got a decision wrong. They should be sitting below Everton. They should be essentially 13th in the Premier League, and that's considering they got some good results along the way and some lucky results. But there was a contentious thing with a minute to go where both managers were spoken to. Jurgen Klopp looked a bit bemused and a bit like, oh my God, what's going on now? So there was an incident between Henderson and Gabriel. Now, there's been nothing come out about what that was, but it was obviously something quite serious because they had to speak to both managers. But what the rumour, and I will stress this is a rumour, is that what came out of his mouth was something to do with racism. So I don't want to say that's what he did because we don't know, but that's a rumour, and that would make sense as to why he spoke to both managers. But he didn't see a straight red, which I would have thought that would have been a straight red offence. But do you think it had something to do with there was like 30 seconds left to play and it was more like, let's sort this out retrospectively afterwards because we need to get to the bottom of what's actually happened, rather than send him off, cause big uproar, and then go, actually, is it as bad as what it was? Or do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
no.
What do you think from watching it? What do you think may have happened there?
So, to be honest, I've seen. It's very difficult with the quality of videos and stuff because I think they were trying to draw attention away from what was going on.
Yes.
But I've seen some footage on social media. Whatever Henderson says to Gabriel's not happy about. He goes and speaks to the ref, and then there's kind of a bit of a huddle between everyone, and you don't really know what's going on. But tempers are obviously flared.
Yeah.
I don't know what could have been said. Unless it was something like, oh, your mum or whatever, your mum's so fat when she sits around the house, she sits around the house. Do you know what I mean? Something like that. I doubt they would have kicked up so much of a fuss. A, to go and speak to both the managers, and B, I did see it actually. It's one of these things that you kind of think, oh, it'll just get brushed under the carpet. But I did see on Sky Sports News this morning that an investigation is being undertaken by the FA, or it's been reported to the FA for investigation. So you don't do something like that if it's not.
It points to he's said something along the racism lines, doesn't it?
Yeah, and as you quite rightly said, if it is something that's obviously the Premier League, and I think the vast majority of people, because you will always have that minority, it's not something you want to see in the modern game. And when you see players taking the knee week in, week out, saying, look, we don't, or this is our way of marking our supporting of the racism out movement, then something then like that happens, you do need to question whether they need to obviously abandon that now. But again, it just go back to that minority thing. If it does come out that he has said something a little bit naughty, he'll be banned, or something will happen. They will take retrospective action. Yeah. I'd imagine from the Premier League and also at club level.
Oh, they'd have to. Although they didn't, did they? They didn't when Suarez and Evra. And I want to say it was Jamie Carragher who reached out to Evra when that happened. I was reading about this the other day and he said, so it's slightly sidetracking, but when they wore those tops saying we stand with Suarez, he said we didn't really understand what was going on and what it was all about. We didn't understand what he said, and he said, oh, I'm sorry, we shouldn't have done that. We were all in the wrong there. We all had sort of from the club level, this is what needs to happen. You need to stand with him. So if that happens again, is this a case that institutionally, at an upper level of Liverpool, that's the opinion of, well, it's acceptable? Is that conspiracy theory number 2, Mike? After Asthmagate, not only asthma, but they're all racists.
I know that last comment was a little bit tongue in cheek, but
it was completely tongue in cheek. Well,
no, I know exactly what you're saying, but even if it is, I'm not for 1 second saying it is, but even if it is some sort of, or that is the opinions of a few people within the club, they'll obviously have to come out and say these do not, or these opinions do not reflect the ownership of Liverpool FC, or something to that effect. You know what I mean? So, I'll be interested to see what comes of that, if anything. And I think if it was, I think the outcome of the investigation will be more damning. Because if one party turns around and says, this is what was discussed, or we can't go into the details of what was discussed, however, we've managed to kind of clean it up under.
Yeah.
And if Arsenal or Gabriel aren't happy about it, I'm going to assume that one or the other is going to come out and say, this is what this prick said to me. I think it's disgusting.
I think in cases like this, if it's sort of not brushed under the carpet as such, but if it's not dealt with severely, I think they would have every right to put it into the court of public opinion. Do you know what I mean? That's more that's gonna. Although okay, you wouldn't say cause to violence, but that would have more of a knock-on effect in terms of wrongdoing than a fine would. Yeah. Oh, I can't get any endorsement deals because no one wants to be with me. Oh, actually, everyone boos me at every club I go to. Do you know what I mean? That's got more of a knock-on effect than, it is £10,000 fine and you miss 3 games or whatever it may be. But we'll wait and see. So we'll keep that one hot on the press. But obviously we also did mention Trent Alexander-Arnold. He's a Gareth Southgate favourite and undeniably creative. I think that I would argue he's corner for that. He's a very creative player, but defensively, piss poor. Especially this season, he got found out a couple of times last year, but this year he's just been absolutely diabolical. Now I don't know whether that's because the centre back's not covering him as well, or if it's a case he's going so far forward, he's not able to track back, and he's lost a bit of confidence where he's been done a number of times now. What's your opinion on that? Should he be at the World Cup? Or should he be a right back at the World Cup?
you know what? I'm kind of in two minds about this because obviously we've mentioned this a couple of weeks ago. I think when we were talking about the Conference League games,
Yep.
is that he is a guy that can, or his creativity is absolutely brilliant. And there's no denying it. His ability to ping a ball 70, 80 yards up the pitch on a sixpence, I don't think there's any question about. But you've got to say this season, a lot of Liverpool's downfalls have been because of Trent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know you can't solely blame it on him because obviously it's a team game, but you're seeing him dragged out of positions so much frequently. But I think it was a couple of games ago as well. I think it was against Brighton.
Yep.
And you just see him get run past, and it's just like, oh, what's the point? And then instead of sprinting to try and amend the wrongs, so to speak, he's just jogging and like, oh well, it's happened again. And that's not the sort of attitude that you want. And I think just looking at Maguire as an example, obviously he was started in the last two games against Italy and Germany, I think it was, in the Conference League, and we get absolutely battered. You see him get taken off, and then all of a sudden we seem to start scoring goals. Against Germany was a perfect example of it. Mm-hmm. So maybe a break from football for the time being. Obviously, we're not saying definitely, but maybe a bit of a break, because let's not forget the number of games that Liverpool played last season as well.
Sort of take him out the firing line, so to speak, give him a little rest and let him recuperate mentally.
Yeah, so obviously include him in training and stuff, but just explain to him, look, we're just going to take you out of the frame for a little while, and just to see if that gives you a bit of a break, kind of compose yourself again, and then we go again in a couple of weeks' time or whatever. But it's a massive fall from grace, not only for him, but I think for Liverpool as well.
Yes.
When you see
not
some
just
of the
him,
results that they pulled out recently, and as you mentioned at the start of this podcast, confidence breeds confidence. When you look at the results that they had last year, they were, not even just last year, the last few years. Losing out to Manchester City twice, I think, by a point, and then obviously winning the league. And yeah, it's crazy to think. But it all does seem to stem back to Mane. They're not scoring enough goals, as you mentioned.
It's the selflessness of the players. And, and here's the thing. I think you've hit a couple of really good points there in the fact of they've had such a good run for such a long time. If we go back 10 years and say, Liverpool are 10th after 8 games, no one would be that surprised to go, but they'll be thereabouts at the end of the season. But no one would be shocked that, they're 10th. Now, here's the other thing that I've just picked up on. You said about, obviously, once he gets done, he's not sprinting back. When he was first breaking into the team, that's what he was fantastic for. He had this creativity, but when he did get done, he was relentless, and he pushed and pushed and pushed till he won the ball back. Now, I think maybe you're right that giving him a little break would help him. Do you know what I would do? I would play Calvin Ramsey behind him, and I would push him a little bit further forward and say your defensive responsibilities are still there, but they're not as much. And let him push forward. Let him become that creative spark and try and replace those assists that Mane gave from further up the pitch. Don't know if it'd work, but that's what I would do if I was Klopp. But I don't think he's going to be in a job long.
It's funny you should mention that, actually, because I suppose you can draw comparisons to Gareth Bale. Because obviously when he first started, he was a defender and was getting done left, right and centre. And then I was like, brainwave, let's try and push you up a little bit further. Maybe we're kind of seeing that transition for Trent to come from potentially a right back
to a sort of
a conventional right back to to pushing up to the wing. And I'll be interested to see, actually, if there's any training footage of him playing within that creative up the field position, or whether it's just, this is your position, this is where you got to stick to.
I think in some senses that probably is the case. Maybe he does want to be a winger. But will Klopp go for it? He's not in a position at the minute to experiment. If he had done it last season, then maybe. But the trouble is he's got Salah in front of him as the right winger, and although he's very good, he's on the wane a bit, and he's towards the end of his career. So I think maybe they should start experimenting because something's got to change. But say seventh season syndrome for Klopp again. His team are struggling. It's happened at every club he's happened. If he turns it round, fantastic. But I think we could see the end of him at Liverpool. Not necessarily in the Premier League, but definitely at Liverpool. And I think potentially he could end up at Tottenham, or he could end up at Newcastle. And I know that sounds very strange because both of those teams are doing quite well. But if Conte leaves to go to Juventus, there's an opening there. Klopp would fit sort of the mould they would want. And also Newcastle, I know Eddie Howe's doing a good job, but actually marketability in football now is a big thing. Klopp's more marketable than Eddie Howe is.
There's also that, but there's also the England links. I know he's come out and said
potentially, yeah,
he's flattered that he's been considered, or his name's been banded around for the England job. And I think Gareth Southgate's already come out and said this is going to be his last tournament regardless. So you never know, in a year's time or whatever, after the World Cup, depending on how well we do or whatever, that you could see Southgate out, Eddie Howe in, and then that leaves the vacant position for Newcastle as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's endless possibilities, but let's move on a little bit. West Ham obviously have started to recapture some form. We beat Everton. We didn't beat Everton. We beat Fulham quite convincingly, considering how well they started the season. They've fallen off a cliff a little bit. Not saying I predicted that too, but they did start on fire. Andreas Pereira, former Manchester United player, phenomenal goal, just beat everyone. Fabianski didn't have a clue, but we did come back. Obviously, we had Jared Bowen scored a penalty, Scamacca scored a goal which he thought was offside, and then Antonio. And here's the thing, Antonio scored a goal that was given. It bounced up, it hit his shoulder, his elbow, everything. Full sprint, they gave it to him, which I'm not moaning about. But Rashford had one very similar, didn't touch as much of his arm, wasn't given. And I think, again, the consistency of VAR has come into that, because I think Manchester United should have won that game 3-1. Not that that's anything to do with West Ham. But Scamacca, we've now got a striker, and he's being played as a striker. And we're starting to see goals. Who would have known that was our problem? We didn't have a striker. But say, he has started to be played, and Antonio's coming on as a sort of a substitute to bully players a bit later on, and he's scoring goals. So it's all started to click at West Ham. Hurrah. And you've got to look out for me at the corner flag on Thursday, because I'm going to be by the corner flag.
Yeah, boy.
Opposite end of the... opposite, yeah, completely sort of like the opposite end from the away fans, because I don't like them scumbags. But yeah, it's we're playing Anderlecht, and if we get a point, then I think we're through to the knockout stages of the Europa Conference League, which means that we can see some of the youngsters come in and play, and give even more first team players a rest. Breathe. But yeah, so I think I'm still worried that form's going to drop off. I'm still worried that we're still the wrong end of the table. I know we've got a few games to go. We've still got 28 games to play, but it doesn't... We need to string together a few more results. We've got a bit of a torrid run coming. We've got Liverpool, Man United. We play Southampton this weekend, and on paper again, we should win that game. Doesn't necessarily go that way. And same with Bournemouth. We should win that game. Doesn't necessarily go that way. But if we can string another 3 or 4 wins together, or decent results, some draws for some of the harder games, then we are only realistically 5 points behind Manchester United and Chelsea. 6 points behind Chelsea. So I know they've got a game in hand, but we've got to play both those teams yet. So we could start very slowly pulling it back. But we'll wait and see. What's your take on the Antonio being given the goal and Rashford not? Do you think that's a fair, or do you think that's a bit of a whoopsie again by VAR?
Do you know what? I don't even know anymore. Like I said, the level of consistency that we've seen already this season is very questionable. I mean, I did see the Antonio goal, and to be honest, I was quite surprised because I don't even know how they can justify the goal, because I think the rule is if you see it touching any part of the hand that gives you an advantage, the goal needs to be chalked off.
Yep.
And you can quite clearly see here, as you said, about 14 different parts of his arm in order for him to score. And I would love to see the justification as to why they have allowed that to stand, given that we have seen goals already chalked off this season because of it.
Yeah. I mean, my understanding of it is because if it's not in direct play to a goal, that if it's not intentional, then they give it. So I don't know whether the VAR has gone, oh well, he's not meant it, but let's give the goal. Where, and this is the difficult thing, because I think that's how it should be played. If he was at full sprint, it's bounced up, boom, 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 and okay, he scored the goal, but Rashford did the same. He was at full sprint, jumping around a player, it hit him, and he's managed to still get under control and take it. But it needs to be one or the other. I don't think you can play them side by side. It either is or isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, as I said, don't understand the level of consistency, and it's something that we've mentioned time and time again.
Yep.
That they need to address it, because it's just not good enough. It really isn't. And you can justify, or the officials can have these little meetings, get their story straight. This is the reason why they've done it. I know they have come out, or ex-professional referees do come out and give their opinions for some incidents or whatever. Then I don't understand how you can implement a system that's supposed to kind of rule out all these incidences, but it's all subjective.
Yes.
You might as well sack it all off, leave it for the referees to have run of the game again.
Yep.
And as you mentioned a couple of weeks ago, the only thing... Oh, no, sorry, I think it was something I mentioned. The only thing to use it off would be offsides. But even then, they seem to take an age for those to be decided. So, yeah, I don't understand.
No. But on a bit more of a positive note, Ronaldo has found the score sheet again to score his 700th career club goal. Over 4 clubs, obviously. 5 for Sporting Portugal, where he started. 101 for Juventus. 144 for Manchester United. And a whopping 450 for Real Madrid. Now, I know we all take the mickey out of the French league, say it's a farmers' league, but surely that shows that in 11 years, 450 goals, that Spain is a farmers' league. It has 2.5 big teams, doesn't it? Really, let's be serious. It has Barcelona, Real Madrid, and Atletico some of the time. But yeah, it's phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. I mean, he scored 27 goals against Sevilla and 25 against Madrid. I mean, they're all in the top 10 of who he scored against. They're all Spanish clubs. I know that's where he spent the longest time of his career, but even so, it's absolutely ridiculous. But I do have a question for you.
Go ahead.
This is how the stats are read for left foot, 125, right foot, 460, headers, 113, other, 2. What does other mean? What's that, like off his arse, or what does that mean?
Yeah, shoulder and the bum.
But
there's got to be one, surely, when the ball's come over or whatever, and he's just gone like that.
Well, he's lucky VAR didn't exist then, isn't he? Would have been ruled out. Would have been ruled out. Most of his goals, funnily enough, come from inside the box. Did you know that?
No.
And only 48 from direct free kicks.
That's still quite a lot, though, isn't it?
It is a fair amount. Here's the thing, right? That Ronaldo is a danger in the closing stage of the game. Between 76 and 90 minutes, that's when he scored his most goals. So it's where players are getting tired. And we've said he's a machine of a man. That's where he's got most of his goals. And I'm not really surprised. But they have, on Sky Sports, they have a nice big feature on it. Lots of stats for those of you who love it. And it shows all of his, all of the games that he scored in and how many he scored.
I wonder how long that reel would be for all of his 700 goals.
A fair time. Probably an hour, at least.
That's like a feature length, isn't it?
Well, if it's, you think if it's
just on goals.
If it's a minute a goal,
700 minutes.
700 minutes. What's that? Let's just get the calculator out. 700 divided by 60. That's 11.6.
Yeah, I'm not watching that film.
So yeah, so if it's a minute per goal, it's going to take 11 hours of your life. Yeah, crazy, absolutely crazy. Do you think? Obviously, big thing at the minute is Haaland and the amount of goals he's scoring. Do you think that he will ever overtake that sort of record? I know they've said if he plays till the same age, and I think that's what Ronaldo's got going for him. He's played to looked after himself to a long age. Haaland would have to score 46 goals a season on average to match that.
So how many goals? I think this is a bit of homework to find out how many goals Haaland is on as it stands. Then, because let's be honest. I mean, I know he's scored a ridiculous amount of goals already this season for Manchester City, but surely he can't replicate that year in, year out. And I think you mentioned a couple of weeks ago that he only always he's come up with some sort of unofficial agreement that he's only going to be in the Premier League for 3 years or something.
Yeah, that's what his dad was saying. There was rumours that he had a Real Madrid clause in his contract for a couple of years. Pep said not a chance that we would have put that in there. So he's 22 years old, Mike, and he has scored a total of 100. Oh no, that's taken into account. That's going to take into account the international goals, I think, which is not what we want. Or is it? No, it's not. So he scored 151 goals already. 153 goals already.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Right, here's the thing, right? He started at Mould under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, 20 and 50. He then moved to Salzburg, where he got 29 and 27. And then from there, he went to Borussia Dortmund, where he got 86 goals in 89 games with 23 assists. So it's like he is an absolute monster. This he's only just turned 22.
86 goals in 89 games.
Yeah, and here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. He could have been England's number one striker because he was born in Leeds, but Gareth Southgate fucked it up and he declared for Norway. So just think about that, people. Just think about that. Could have had Haaland leading the line for England. We'd have won something by now.
Disgusting.
It's
disgusting.
But do you think it potentially could catch him? I think it all depends on when he gets to 30. Is he going to hang up the boots, or is he going to go, you know what? I've won everything. I'm the Premier League top goal scorer by 800 goals. I don't need to do anything else.
Well, yeah. I mean, he could be. Do you know? I still can't get over the fact that he scored 14 or 15 goals already.
Yeah,
15 or 16 now.
Did I not say this before the media got behind it and he started actually doing it? Was I not saying that he was going to do this? If Foden,
you know he's good.
Yeah.
You know he's good, but you don't realise how good he is.
He's monstrous. There's been a number of defenders come out and went, "Can we just like not play that game and just give them the points because I don't want to play it." Yeah, he's a monster. It's a mentality thing. It's a mentality, and
he doesn't stop moving either.
Did you see?
Always see him
Did
on
you
his
see him?
toes.
So the other day, the referee dropped his spray, his foam spray. Haaland ran out of the box, picked it up, chucked it to him, ran back into the box, and then scored. Because he didn't want the referee to not know where it was, because then he thought he might be ruled out of VAR because the ref hasn't got his proper gear, or they might stop play till he can find it. So he ran out, chucked it at him, ran back and scored. What's that about? I want to see his sprinting stats, if I'm honest.
Yeah, and you are the stat man, so no doubt you'll be able to find that. Mate, I can't get over it. I don't think we will ever see. I mean, it could be. Let's just play devil's advocate. It could just be that he'll smash all the records this year, and he'll be some 2-ball player next year. I doubt it.
Not a chance.
Because he's obviously proven that he's not that, or hasn't got that sort of level of mentality already at 22 years old, as you've just mentioned. So, yeah, it's crazy. Absolutely crazy. And I say we'll never see a player like that again, but we've just mentioned that Ronaldo scored his 700th club goal.
Yeah.
So, yeah, another crazy one.
Yeah, I'll have to have a look through sprinting stats because that's going to be an in-depth dive. But what they were saying is if he carried on scoring at the rate he's scoring, it's only going to take him 4 years to break the Premier League goal scoring record, which will be phenomenal. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine? It's not been broken for ages. Harry Kane's very clearly eking his way up there. Haaland comes in 4 years.
So that would put him at 26.
So the point where he's in his prime, he's like, I've already broken it.
Yeah.
I can go to another league and break that one as well.
Do you know what? I'd love to see his goals to minute ratio at the end of the season.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, right? He could have had another 4 goals already, but Foden was too greedy at the beginning of the season to pass to him. But he only has a 55% on target ratio.
That's also really scary. The amount of goals that he's scored, and he's only hitting
the target half the time.
55%.
Yep.
That's ridiculous.
And I think it's one of those. He said Kevin De Bruyne is the best player he's ever played with, and Kevin De Bruyne must be loving it because it doesn't matter if the pass is good, bad, or indifferent. He's getting on the end of it. Doesn't matter. He's on the end of it. But yeah, it's just phenomenal to see. And to be honest, he's one of those players that I would like to see live. Your team might get tonked 18-0, but I'd like to see it live. What I would say is we did quite well considering.
Yeah.
But that was one of those games that Phil Foden could have given him the 2 goals, but he didn't.
Selfish.
But I do think we need to speak about something a little bit more serious. Obviously, we've seen a number of players, unfortunately, pass away on the pitch. Christian Eriksen seems to be doing very well, considering what happened to him not so long ago. But this week we have seen Brighton midfielder Enoch Mpuru. I don't know if I've pronounced that right. I believe I have. Has retired at the age of 24 after a hereditary heart condition has been found when he was away with Zambia, and he fell ill on the plane. And they did some tests and went, "Yeah, you're not playing again because you're going to die on the pitch if you do." Very, very sad, considering.
Yeah. Obviously, you've mentioned there's a couple of incidents that we've seen, certainly in our lifetime, players dropping down on the pitch. And it's a scary thing. Obviously, we saw, as you quite rightly said, Christian Eriksen, I believe it was in the Euros a couple of years ago. In fact, no, it was the World Cup.
Euro 2020.
Oh, it was Euros. Of course, yeah, we're just coming up to the World Cup, idiot. Yeah, so and that was scary. Had been unconscious for a strangely long period of time, but managed to pull through it. And as you mentioned, it's obviously playing with Manchester United. I'm not going to say he's over the worst for it because I'm assuming with any sort of heart condition, it could just be any moment you could just go, nah,
Yeah.
my body's not giving up. Fabrice Muamba, again, is another player that we've seen certainly in our lifetime where drop down on the pitch, people try and resuscitate him. It doesn't look good, but it's obviously had to hang up his boots. And as you quite rightly said, it is a sad story when you think of the number of players that try and cut it in the professional game. Obviously, you're playing for a Premiership team, and your career is cut short because of something that's beyond your control.
Yep.
He is sad, and you have to obviously send your thoughts out to him, and I wish him a long and happy life. You just have to. In fact, I don't even think it's something that you could even remotely try and understand.
No.
Unless you were in that position, i.e., your Fabrice Muambas, your Christian Eriksen's, they're the only sorts of people, and anyone else that it's happened to, they're the only sort of people that are going to know what it's like to potentially have that feeling. So yeah, thoughts go out to him.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like he's a player that's never really played. He's played at the top level in countries for a while. I mean, he's got 26, 27 caps for Zambia. Scored a couple of goals. I do think we will see. Well, I don't know if you will see. I know Fabrice Muamba has reached out to a number of players that's affected. Obviously, be one of the few people who's experienced that horrificness and lived to tell the tale. It's a shoulder to lean on for experience, isn't it? But I do think he'll end up staying in football, whether that be in coaching or scouting or something, because most of these players, football's in the blood, isn't it? It's not. Although, okay, yes, it's a job. Most of them will tell you they're privileged to do so and would do it for free. They're just lucky enough to be paid for it. But yeah, so our thoughts do go out to him. Hopefully he gets better. Hopefully he recovers to the best he can and finds happiness. But is there anything else to add to this week? Oh, we've got to do some predictions, Mike.
We have got
I was so close to wanting to just go, I'm going to keep the trophy. Fuck your predictions. Come on in, give us some rundowns of where we are before we cap this episode off.
Are you sure you want to go through this?
Yeah, let's do it. We'll get this whole podcast done in under an hour. We're getting there, but we'll get there.
Very quickly, West Ham versus Fulham. You had 2-0, I had 2-1, which is why I was a little bit annoyed that Antonio got his goal stood. So yeah, point each for the correct result.
I'll take it.
Or yeah, so I'm not happy about that. Arsenal versus Liverpool. You had 4-1, I had 3-2. So it's 3 points for me for the correct score and 1 point to you for the correct result.
You would have preferred 4-1 though, wouldn't you?
Sorry?
You would have preferred 4-1.
I would have preferred 4-1, absolutely, but no, I'll take it. So 2 points for you for the week and 4 points for me. So that moves the season totals up. I was trailing for so long, Ian. You're currently on 19 points and I'm now on 23. Booyah! Trophies coming home, son. I'm telling you, end of this season. And just on that, my predictions just recently have been pretty good. And I'm just a little bit gutted that Brighton, the bastards, didn't score against Tottenham the other day because that would have won me 150 quid off the pound. So Brighton, not very happy with you. Danny Welbeck, why didn't you score? Pascal Gross, why didn't you score? I'm not even going to support you for the rest of the season now. Not I did anyway, but it's even more reason not to now. Right, moving on to this week's predictions. 2 games on Sunday, obviously, with the European games this week. Southampton versus West Ham and Leeds versus Arsenal. I'm going to give you the honour of going first this week. What are your thoughts?
So we're back on good form. I will say that. We have got we're not travelling far because we're only obviously playing at home against Anderlecht. And generally that will be a rotated team from what we've seen. So therefore, I'm going to go with... We're getting on the score sheet, aren't we? I'm going to go 2-1 to West Ham.
Oh,
I feel a James Ward-Prowse free kick at some point is going to be our undoing. But yeah, the 2-1 to West Ham, please.
Okay, I'm going to go for 2-2 in that particular fixture. As you mentioned, they have been scoring goals as of late. And you have got the Europa Conference League. So I know you've mentioned. I'm going to stick with my choice. 2-2. Going to stick with it. Gut feeling. It's not let me down so far. Right, Leeds versus Arsenal. Also on Sunday, 2:00. Again, very much like you, we are probably going to play a more rotated squad on Thursday. We've got Bodo Glimt at away this week. I've got to say, actually, from what I saw of the performance last week in the Europa League, I think Bodo Glimt, they could have done more out of their game. I think they were unlucky. They gave us a bit of a runaround. Obviously, playing on their patch this week, we have got to do travelling, and then we are travelling again on Sunday. But I think if we can keep our first team fit, obviously we did see a couple of changes from the team this week, i.e. Tommy Asu coming in at left back, but I think we got fairly unscathed in that particular game. So I am going to put us down for where are Leeds currently sitting at the moment. Leeds are currently in 14th. Only got 12 goals this year. Do you know what? I'm going to put us down for. I think we'll concede, but I'm going to go for. I'm going to be a bit ambitious. I'm going to go for 4-1 this week.
And now I was thinking about 3-1 because of the travelling. Leeds have been struggling to hold any lead or being on level form once they've scored. I'm going for 2-1 to Arsenal, please.
Okay.
I think the quality will get you, but the travelling, you'll have a little bit of a blip somewhere.
Okay, so just to recap, obviously Southampton versus West Ham.
I'll play Southampton. We'll smash them.
You've gone for 2-1. I've gone for 2-2. Leeds versus Arsenal. You've gone for 2-1. I've gone for 4-1. Just to obviously remind the viewers, this is a weekly competition we do for the lovely trophy that you see over Ian's shoulder in the rack. We get 1 point for a correct result and 3 points for a correct score, and obviously the most amount of points at the end of the season will win the coveted FDT-TV trophy.
It will. So make sure you, again, we'll start as we finish. Make sure you go over to the YouTube channel, leave your comment underneath what you think the result's going to be for those two fixtures, and while you're there, why not subscribe? But Mike, have you got anything else to add to this week's podcast?
No, I think we've waffled on for long enough, and anything else that we were going to say up next week.
Yep, no, that's fair enough. So until then, I've been Ian.
I've been Mike.
And we'll see you soon.
Peace.